Hello, everybody. My name is John Watson, and I'm joined today by Craig and Miriam. We'll work on BBC Sport at the studios in Salford, and essentially our job there is to put together sports bulletins which run on various different outlets and programmes. You've got the BBC News channel, you've got the international channel, which is BBC World News, and we also put together sports bulletins for BBC Breakfast, which is on BBC One in the mornings, which runs from about 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. So there's lots of different areas in which we kind of work across, but predominantly it's very much sport focused. And within that, there's lots of different roles, from presenting to reporting to producing to editing up pictures, writing scripts, making packages, making kind of short videos, which we call VTs. So if we kind of use language in this chat, which sounds a bit alien and unfamiliar, do ask, because there's lots of kind of TV jargon speak, which we use quite a lot of, which can be quite confusing. So if there's anything you want to know, obviously pitch in with questions throughout. But what I'll do, I'll kick off by getting Craig and Miriam to tell us a little bit about how they kind of got into the industry and what their kind of job roles are and what it entails specifically. So Miriam, should we start with you? Just tell us, how did you sort of start in BBC Sport? What was your kind of route in?
So my route in actually was pretty simple. So there's something called the Journalism Trainee Scheme, which is for kind of the whole of BBC News, and they recruit, I think it's about 15 people each year to work at different parts of BBC News. So that might be in politics, it might be in the business unit. There's also specialists like data journalists traineeship, but there was one traineeship just for sports news, so I only applied to that one. So I applied in 2017, 4 years ago now, and then I think I applied in like the February of that year, and I only got on it in July because there's quite a few different application processes. So yeah, and then I started that traineeship in September. So that was it was, I guess it's a difficult thing to get onto, but an easy way to just get a foot in the door. And then you do a year training, so you work with BBC Sport Online, and then radio, and then TV News, where you both work. So yeah, and then after that I got a job at TV, which I did for a year, and now I'm freelance.
So we'll talk a little bit about kind of what the jobs you do now, but just tell us, how hard was that trainee scheme to get onto, and what kind of skills and things did you have to produce and show to be able to be kind of admitted onto that course?
So I think, I mean, people tell you different things, but I think about 5,000 people apply. And yeah, I don't know how many people only apply to the sport part of it, probably not loads. But you do like an online application, and you just say like why you want to work at the BBC. And I think we gave like 2 different story ideas that we could bring in. So mine were obviously all focused on sport. And then that's like the initial stage, so anyone can apply to that. And then you get through to the next stage, which I think was like, and this all changes by the way, so it might not be the same this year, but it was probably like you review like the 6 o'clock news. They show you a video and ask you like specific questions on the editorial side of it. So it might be like, how would you make this impartial and more balanced, things like that. So just to check, I guess, that you know that what it would take to be a journalist, even if you don't have those skills already. It's just checking you kind of get what those things are.
And did you have to have any experience already, to apply for that, or did you have to kind of, or could you do it, you don't have to have any kind of journalism experience to try and get on that course?
I don't think you necessarily need any. So like there were people on the trainee scheme who had been teaching and wanted a career change. I had quite a lot, so by that time I did my English Lit and French degree at Manchester University, but on the side from second year, just when I was injured. I was an athlete growing up for about 12 years. I was injured and then just kind of fell into writing for an athletics website, and then like 2 months later became the editor, and that was just like a really small website that grew and grew and grew into something massive, and now they live stream like loads of races across Europe. So I was quite fortunate in that I found that website when it was really small. And then from then I was working with British Athletics as a consequence of that, and just going with them around Europe to do Diamond League races. But I also then, after my degree, which was 4 years, you know, like I spent my year abroad in France, and I was writing French articles for the IAAF and going to report on like the Paris Marathon. And then I did a master's in broadcast journalism. That's what
So you obviously had a passion for sport anyway. I mean, you were kind of competing initially, and then you were able to kind of build on that and start writing about it. We've had a question in just asking, how did you make your application stand out differently from the others applying for that course, do you think?
It's a good question. I guess what I realised quite early on is that I wanted to tell stories that maybe not a lot of people tell. So I wanted to tell sports stories about diverse communities in the UK and how that affects those communities and those sports. So I guess like every story I do now just naturally falls into that bracket, just because I feel like it's not always, we don't always tell those stories properly, and it's something I just really care about. I'm mixed race, and I think, you know, a lot of sports news is kind of dominated by racism in football, and I think I thought there's something we're not really doing here. So those kind of stories I think probably made me stand out. And I think the BBC realised we need to do better at telling those stories, so they were actively looking for people who might want to. But not just those stories, you know, things like about disability support and people with hidden illnesses, things like that. I think those are two of the stories I pitched. So that must have been something. I'm not really sure, to be honest. Okay, I think that
bringing stories that kind of for underrepresented groups, let's say, you know, and I guess the BBC is that's something that the BBC kind of should be doing more of, you know. And maybe that helped you, you know, with your application, kind of, you know, picking out stories that perhaps haven't been covered, let's say, in the mainstream as much as perhaps they should be.
Yeah, and I think anyone who can bring a bit of passion to their ideas and tell stories that they feel like they can tell well and know a lot about, you're always going to be in a good position in the BBC, right? Because like we tell so many stories, but there's also so many we don't tell, and if you've got someone who can tell those stories, I think it's you kind of stand out a bit naturally anyway.
How about you, Craig? What was your routine?
So after I graduated, I did history at Newcastle. My plan was to do a postgrad as well in broadcast journalism or sports journalism. Similar to Miriam, when I was younger, I wanted to be a footballer. When I was about 15, it became clear that wasn't going to happen. And the thing that I was always good at school was English. So I wanted to be a sports journalist, basically, in what I thought I wanted to be in print media. So as I was saying, after I graduated, I started sending loads of CVs out and got quite lucky that I got a job as a runner for a really small TV company in London that had nothing to do with sport. They made like specialist factual documentaries on things like climate change. We did sort of a film for the government, and basically I was the dog's body. So made tea, went and got the lunches, dropped off tapes, organised shoots, all that kind of stuff. And I was there for about a year, and our big series that we made was for BBC World News. So I met quite a lot of good people at the BBC and basically said, how can I get into sport? So I was just trying to network a way in to get into sport, because that's my passion. That's always been my passion. So when the BBC moved up to Salford, I left that job in London and moved back up to Macclesfield, which is where I'm from, near Manchester. And basically through the contacts that I'd made from that BBC World News series, just basically started banging on the door at BBC Sports News, just saying, can I just come and have a look at the operation, just sort of see the office. That took quite a few months. That whole time I was also applying for the trainee schemes and the graduate schemes and that kind of thing, but I didn't manage to actually get on them. So eventually I managed to get my foot in the door kind of thing, and just what was supposed to be a day of looking around the office ended up being what we call a shadowing shift. So at entry level, the first job within our team is a broadcast assistant. So basically you update all the latest scores from the day's news and write a few scripts for the presenters and the producers and that kind of thing. So I was quite lucky because it was a year where it was a World Cup year and it was a busy year that year, so they needed people. So I started off freelancing, freelanced for about 3 years before I eventually had a series of short-term contracts and then was made staff.
So I guess for you, slightly different way in to Miriam. And, you know, Miriam kind of highlighted how competitive that journalism trainee scheme is.
Yeah.
What other routes would you suggest? Obviously, you know, yours came about because you found a job after leaving university. You know, that gave you a foot in the door. But kind of for anyone, let's say, who feels maybe the opportunities don't come their way because they don't get on one of those, you know, schemes. You know, what would your advice be? You know, what are the other routes for them?
So basically, what I would say is just do whatever you can to build the skills for the industry you need to get in, and basically just try and do everything. So like I said, that year I was lucky that I learned how to research TV properly. I learned how to use a camera. I learned how to write for TV, just things like that. Just practice things like that in your spare time, you know, editing software, all those kind of things. Just think what actual tools you need and then just build upon them. And also, I mean, the big thing for me was networking, was finding out people who worked in the industry and chatting to them and working out how you could get in, basically.
Yeah, I can relate to that. That's certainly what I did. I remember when I was starting out, I would just email as many people as possible. And actually people were usually really nice and would always reply. And it's funny because I've kept quite a few of those actual emails that I sent as a sort of 15, 16-year-old to people who were working at the BBC at the time, and everyone would usually take the time to reply. Wouldn't necessarily offer you a job straight away. That's not going to happen, but you've immediately made contact. You've kind of established a line of communication with someone, and you know, you can often build on that. That's something that I found quite useful. And admittedly, I was working in radio. I got some work experience at a radio station at the time, and I've kind of linked on to one of the other questions that we've had. You know, do you think work experience is more valuable than qualifications? Miriam, what do you reckon?
I would say so, yeah. And I remember when I was looking around university when I was probably 18, and somebody said you really need to do work experience, and I just like remembered that moment and just like took it upon myself to do absolutely everything. So at uni I worked at like the university TV station, the radio station. I wrote for like the university newspaper a few times. I just decided that my athletics club needed a media officer and created that role. Just like what Craig said, just like do anything you can, say yes to every opportunity. But also, if you feel like there should be a role in somewhere that you can create a role, just do it, because like no one's going to stop you. And it's the same, I guess, with things like, you know, editing software, or even setting up like a YouTube channel if you want to present and things like that. But yeah, I think work experience, even just like you say, like sending emails, but even going to like the places. So I did experience at Radio Shropshire because I just knew someone through the website I worked for who freelanced there and said, can I do like 3 days just to see what it's like? And any little thing you can do just to get a bit more experience and get something on your CV, I think is just a big help for the next thing that you want to get on your CV.
Craig? Craig, you there? Oh, we've lost Craig. Gave him the big build up and then he disappeared. Hopefully he'll be able to join us again in a bit. So let's pick up, Miriam, on kind of the jobs that you did when you joined the BBC. And I guess through that trainee scheme, you were lucky that you were able to kind of work in lots of different departments and lots of different areas. So what was the kind of best job that you did upon joining?
I think probably actually the best job, I forgot to mention this, but before I got on the trainee scheme that summer, through my university course, a lady from the BBC came and just was talking to us about work experience, and then we had a chat and she offered me work experience during the athletics world championships in 2017. So I was a runner for a couple of weeks during those championships, so I was like doing what Craig said, like going and getting teas.
He's back.
Here he is. I was like fetching teas and coffees for like Gabby Logan and Colin Jackson, and then putting like cushions on the sofa of the TV set and stuff with their faces on, which is a bit weird, but anyway. So yeah, just that for me was like probably the coolest job I got, because I think on the trainee scheme, like it's all pretty much office based, but to be, you know, on set and at like the coolest athletics event that in the year was the best thing. But on the actual trainee scheme, I think for me, TV was probably the funnest bit, just because I like visual things and I like learning about how things get on air, and it's fun watching you guys as the presenters, and you know, seeing people write your scripts and then you write them and then run to the printer and like going and presenting it, and it's just quite cool to just make a package, like you said, it's like a mini film, and then see it go out on air. I think that was the coolest part of the traineeship for me.
Craig, we were just asking what you know, we were just saying how important experience was, but we're just sort of moving on a little bit now, just by sort of talking about what you feel is the most kind of enjoyable part of your job. So could you just give us an idea of what you know, what a normal day is like for you in the office? What is your kind of traditional day, you know, in the job that you do as an assistant producer?
So traditional day, sort of in the morning, I will have a read around what's the sports news agenda of the day, what are the big stories. Then we will have a meeting at about 12:30, where we will talk about our big programs, which are at 6:30 and at 8:30, and basically decide what's the top story, how we're going to treat those stories, whether it's a package or a live guest, or perhaps somebody doing something on the touch screen. And then basically we'll just decide, divvy up who's doing what in terms of sports stories, and then basically get to work putting together a 20-minute program for that evening.
Sorry, I'm just looking through some of the questions that we've got coming in. I don't want to kind of miss any off. Yeah, just to follow up on what Craig was saying there, one of the questions is just a bit more about my role. Yeah, so essentially, I work very closely with Craig when we're in, you know, throughout the day. As Craig was saying, we've got kind of some bigger programs, which is at 6:30. So as a presenter, it's kind of your job to be writing the scripts and doing your research on stories, because throughout the day we'll set up interviews with various different guests, and kind of when you've got a longer program, it's just trying to pull it all together essentially. So you're kind of thinking of ways that you can kind of link stories together. And as Greg was saying about kind of what is the sporting agenda, you're always kind of thinking, what's the most important story? What do people want to hear? What are they going to be most interested in? And that's all about the audience, really. So I guess one of the big things is kind of who you're talking to, who's going to be listening or watching, and what do they want to hear. And that obviously has a real bearing on kind of which stories we decide to pick day to day. So yeah, it's in my job is kind of very much just sort of, you know, yeah, writing the scripts and just kind of trying to link it all together. I always think it's kind of, you know, everyone's very much a team on the day. And everyone plays a kind of really important part, and you just want to make sure that kind of when you put that together, you're kind of doing everybody justice in a sense, that you've kind of made it all work on the day. And that, I think that's one of the great things, is one of the best things about my job is you just get a huge amount of satisfaction. I think it's very creative, you're building something as a group, a lot of people kind of working hard for kind of like a common goal at the end. And you know, when it all comes off, it's really satisfying. And I always think, I mean, how lucky are we that we get to go to work and watch sport? That's kind of that is our job. We're allowed to have the TV on at work with sport on all day. I mean, Doesn't get much better than that, does it? So just quickly, did you guys think when you were at school you'd be doing the job you are now? Did you think that would kind of become a reality?
It's always the environment that I wanted to work in. I'd never thought that I'd work in news. I thought it would be more, well, documentaries or longer form programming. But now that I do work in news, I absolutely love it. So sport was always the plan for me when I was a kid, but working in news is something that sort of developed afterwards.
Yeah. Miriam?
No, I never thought I'd work in news like Craig said. I think I thought news was just for like posh people, and like I didn't know anyone in the media or anything like that. But now, obviously, sport is a big part of my life. But now that I'm doing this job, it all kind of fits in perfectly. Kind of what Craig was saying about like in English and writing. Actually, it's great because it feels like there's so many different jobs in one, and you can just be so creative, and you get to put things out to like huge platforms of people that read your work and stuff. So, yeah, it's kind of perfect.
Miriam, what sort of? I know we kind of work in TV, but obviously through the JTS scheme and kind of some of the other projects you're working on now, can you just give an idea of some of the other jobs within kind of the BBC or areas that you've worked in that kind of might appeal to some of the people watching?
So when I went freelance, one of the main reasons was because I had learned like all these skills in radio and online as well as TV, and didn't really want to like forget those skills. So I worked at BBC Africa Sport, which was cool because it was TV, but also I got to use my French quite a lot. And then I also worked at Radio London, BBC Radio London. So I was doing quite a lot of reporting there, like live reporting on the radio and lots of packages and going out quite a lot and interviewing people, which was good because it's obviously it's a smaller like station, but you have a lot more responsibility, and I kind of wanted to get those reporting skills. And I did, which was great. I've also worked for a news podcast, which I do want to do sport, so it wasn't like the funnest thing ever, but it was really interesting just working podcasts. And right now I'm doing bits with Newsround, which is really, really cool because it's obviously writing to kids and just simplifying things, which is, I think, a really hard part of journalism, but a really important part. But also now I think I'm mainly doing a lot of writing to BBC Sports website, which is just really cool. Like they're letting me do loads of creative things and just loads of stories that I guess I didn't get to do at TV. It's a lot easier obviously to write an article for online. And I did quite a cool one yesterday actually to launch LGBT History Month, which was about 6 LGBT athletes you should know more about. So just like fun things like that aren't necessarily reporting on like the sports daily news stories. Are a bit more in-depth and creative, which is really cool.
Yeah, taking sport but kind of making it a bit more interesting and accessible and things, I guess, that people might not know a great deal about the subject, which I guess will kind of draw people in a bit more, won't it? Really glad that you're working on Newsround, because that was my first job that I got at the BBC.
Was it?
It was at Newsround. So when I left school, I did some work experience at a local radio station. And I went back there to work after I went to university and kind of built up some more experience. And then a job came up as a researcher on Newsround, which I applied for. And I went there on a very short term, like for like a 3-month contract. That became a 6-month contract. Then it became 12 months. So yeah, that was my first job when I joined the BBC, and loved it. It was great. Such a great program to work on. And I think, yeah, interestingly, that's like writing for younger people is a real skill, because you just can't assume that everyone knows kind of everything about the story. So yeah, it's quite a challenge actually, kind of just condensing it down and making it kind of sort of making quite complex subjects, easy to understand. What would you both say? What's that?
So I was going to say you can be a lot more creative as well, I think, with Newsround.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think, as you're saying, kind of making things visual and making it stand out is a big thing as well. What would you say is kind of the worst part of the job? What's the toughest part of it?
I would I would say getting up early for the
That's
break.
what I was going to say.
And I was gonna say, Craig would probably say the same. I don't really do them anymore since the pandemic, but no, let me have it. Wait, Craig, you go, and then I'll have a proper think.
well, because we work for a news channel which is on 24 hours a day, the shifts have to reflect that. So there's a lot of early starts. So on Thursday, for example, I'm in at 5 a.m. You also have to work overnights, and that can be quite hard to sort of find a rhythm into getting up at different times all the time. I mean, I've been at the BBC 7 years. I'm still not used to starting work at 5 a.m. So I would say that's the hardest thing, but it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, you don't have a regular structure or rhythm to your working week, do you? It's fair to say, you know, your kind of shifts can bounce around quite a bit. And as Craig says, you can be working overnight, then you might have a day off, and then you might be back in doing an early, which is a 5 a.m. start. So yeah, your alarm can be going off at 4:15 in the morning, which you know, on these cold January days can feel pretty miserable at times. But yeah, it's still a fun job, I'd say. What skills would you both say you need to have to what skills do you feel you've got as people which kind of is suited to the jobs that you do?
I would say just having like a curiosity and being able to talk to people and ask questions is kind of key to being a journalist. And you know, just wanting to know and asking questions that not everyone else is asking as well. I think that's quite important, because sometimes sports journalism can be quite dry if it's just like the daily reporting. And I think going a bit beyond that and asking fun questions, and also just being creative, I think that is the most important thing in our job. I think a lot of people maybe take it for granted, but actually if you can be creative and think creatively and think a bit differently, I think you go a long way.
Mm-hmm. Craig?
I think similar to what you were saying before, teamwork is absolutely essential. All sort of cogs in the wheel need to be working together, and the programs are always best when everybody's been working as a team. And I noticed that when people sort of come in and I train new people, that's one thing that you really have to sort of learn, that it is a team effort. And also communication is massive. So similar to what Miriam was saying, you can't be afraid to ask questions. If you don't know, like, you're not going to know everything when you first start. So you just got to be bold. And if you don't know something, then just ask, because more often than not, you will, you know, people are pretty nice about that kind of thing usually. So yeah, I'd say, and also similar to what Miriam was saying, yeah, you've got to be inquisitive. You've got to think creatively. Just constantly think, how can we improve what we're doing, basically.
Yeah, I think you're right. Definitely a natural curiosity, and I think just an interest in people and places. You know, because one of the best things about our job is obviously the people that we work with and the people that you get to meet and speak to, and you know, the ability to talk to people and get on with people as well. I think it does get you a long way. I think, and I always think as well, starting out, it's such a fine balance between being pushy and being engaging, and, you know, having some self-confidence to kind of approach people and say, look, you know, I really think I could be suited for this job, but then not going too far the other way when you can sound like overly confident and just be too full on, too intense. It's not an easy balance to make sometimes, I think. So yeah, I think just certainly be yourself, but obviously have the confidence to approach people, and, you know, don't be afraid to kind of go after what you want, be that a job or whatever else it is that you kind of want to achieve. I just want to pick up on a couple of questions so that we don't kind of miss out on these. So guys, pitch in if you have any more thoughts on these. You know, it says, do you get to work, James says, do you get to work with professional sports people or team managers? We do, definitely, don't we? We kind of get to sort of occasionally interview some really interesting people. One of the best things, you know, about my job, I would say, is certainly some of the people I've got to meet, which has been, you know, Serena Williams, David Beckham, Andy Murray, you know, lots of kind of big sports people. And that's one of the great things, is getting to interview them. Vicky says, what can we do at home now to help develop our skills or learn more about the media sports industry? I guess read as much as you can around your subject that you're kind of passionate or interested in. And I always think as well with like Twitter and Instagram now, you know, you can kind of generate your own audience a little bit. You know, you can start on Instagram, let's say you could kind of be publishing, as I say, publishing or kind of like putting up pictures of, I don't know, your favorite sports team or club or whatever. And you could start to build a bit of a fan base, just kind of reacting to results or matches or things, or create a discussion online. So that's something I think you can do quite a bit of, kind of using social media to your advantage, because I guess that in a sense allows you to kind of be a journalist, I guess. Nadia says, how do you get those first connections to break into TV? Emailing people. I mean, that's something I always did. I'd find out, I'd see someone on TV or hear them on the radio, and I'd just take a punt that their email address would be, I don't know, john.watson@bbc.co. Do you know what I mean? I would just take a punt and email them. And I think that kind of just allows you to kind of pose questions, and I'm sure people will respond and kind of give you some advice and guidance, and it just helps to kind of know where to direct things and who to direct kind of emails towards. So and Abby, I mean, guys, just sort of this one from Abby, of all the people we've got to interview, who's been the most interesting and inspirational people? Anyone that kind of springs to mind that you can think of?
That's a tough question.
Yeah, I interviewed Bob Marley's daughter a few years ago because she kind of revived the Jamaican women's football team, and that was actually just a really cool thing to work on, because just no one had really done the story, and like obviously it's a great story, and it's not just like a sports story, it's a big national story for them, and she was just interested, and she was like, my dad would be proud, and it was just like pretty amazing to chat.
Yeah, that's very cool. Great.
I'm not sure, to be honest, because in terms of my role, it's usually you doing the interviewing, John, isn't it? And then it's me who puts the pieces together later.
Yeah. But I mean,
so, yeah.
What would you, I mean, aside from that, kind of, I guess, what, you know, where do you kind of draw most of your satisfaction from then in kind of your day to day? What's the most enjoyable thing that you think you'd say you did?
I love being part of the engine room of creating news, basically. That's the thing that I get a kick out of. And it's similar to what you were saying earlier, is that, you know, you can put together this 20-minute piece of work over the course of the day that you are genuinely proud of, and a lot of work's gone into it, and you know, it's tough sometimes, and you know, you've got to think on your feet a lot of the time, but at the end of the day, you do have this, you know, we make a product every single day, basically. And it's just being involved in that production is the thing that I get the biggest kick out of, definitely.
How would you say the industry has changed? I mean, I've been working at the BBC for a number of years now, and obviously you guys have come in kind of more relatively recently. How would you say it's changed, and how do you think it's going to change going forward? And what, you know, in light of that, what advice would you give to anyone kind of watching who is still thinking that they'd like to get into the industry?
I would say I think probably the BBC is now focusing a lot more on trying to get younger audiences engaged in our content, and I'm guessing that wasn't really the case like 10 years ago. I think we've kind of realised that obviously you guys are the future, and we need to do a lot more to get you to come and watch us and read us and stuff. So I think that benefits you guys, because obviously you are young and you know what's kind of cool and trendy when a lot of us don't anymore. But also just like the different sports, things like esports that you wouldn't think the BBC covers, but we do. I think little things like that, and things like, I don't know, BMXing and skateboarding that are going to be at the Olympics, like those are really important things to, I would say we don't have loads of people that know about those kind of sports, so having like little niche sports I think is probably good for you guys.
Things getting more digitally focused as well at the moment. So, you know, we work for quite a linear news channel, but if you are able to build up your social media profiles, build YouTube channels, that is the direction of travel that the industry is going. So again, similar to what Miriam was saying, sort of you are in the box seat really in terms of generating the change, because that is how a lot of you guys are growing up with, you know, social media so prevalent in your life. So I think that is the shift where it's going away from sort of linear news programs into more digitally focused pieces.
Just picking up on kind of people in the industry perhaps we admire, or anyone in the industry who inspires you, who would you guys kind of say for that?
Ooh. I don't know, loads of people, I guess. This is maybe like a general one, but I just love Louis Theroux. Like, I'm a massive Louis Theroux fan.
Yeah.
Just because, like, I think, like what I was saying earlier about the curiosity, like he's just so good with people, and I think he gets the best out of people, and I think that makes the best journalism, and it's kind of the coolest part of our job. So yeah, I think Louis Theroux, and obviously he covers some really crazy stuff, but stuff that no one else really does. So I guess that's why I love him.
Mine's a bit old school. When I was younger, it was Des Lynam.
Oh,
so I just thought
good old Des. I'm
way,
right with you there, mate. Right with you.
The way he operated, he was just so. He never looked like he was working. He was just calm and relaxed and perfectly in control. Now, I mean, someone who you two will both know, but the students might not know, is a guy called Joe Wilson, who is basically the best at what I do. So the way that he writes scripts, he makes it so creative, it's so entertaining, and what could be, say, a boring day's cricket becomes a really fascinating minute and a half piece of work. So in terms of within our team, he's definitely someone that I find really inspirational.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, he a lot of his kind of pieces run on the 10 o'clock news or the 1 o'clock news. Yeah, and he does a lot of pieces on the cricket and the rugby. Yeah, he's very, very clever, isn't he, with kind of his use of words and the way he kind of makes that gel with the pictures. It's a real skill. And actually, one thing he does so well is he uses words really sparingly. You think that sometimes you have to be sort of talking all the time, but actually sometimes just allowing the pictures to kind of breathe is a skill in itself, and something he does really well. Abby says, do you think you can get into sports journalism straight from school rather than going to uni?
Yeah, I was going to say, I saw a question about apprenticeships, and the BBC does have I think it's called the Digital Journalism Apprenticeship. So absolutely, you can apply to that. We've had a few people at sport doing it the last couple of years, and they went from, I think, college just straight to BBC Sport, and now they're just like doing really, really well, and you don't need a degree. So yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, there's various stuff available. If you go onto BBC Careers website, there's, you know, apprenticeships, traineeships. There are different avenues rather than, you know, going to university. There's definitely scope to do it that way now.
Great. Well, thanks, guys. Really great to get your thoughts. I think that's just sort of coming towards the end of the session, but I don't know, just before we finish, what would you say would be a kind of key piece of advice for anyone watching? You know, something that perhaps you know, if you knew it, you know what you know now at the start of your career, how would that have helped you?
I would say practice. Now I do voiceover reports. I'm still practicing my voice. You know, when I'm outside the office, I'm still reading scripts. Like, just keep working at it and working at it. Whether it's whatever you want to do, just outside of, you know, your normal working hours, just practice. That would be my biggest bit of advice.
Miriam?
I would say just be, you know, be bold and be you. Don't feel like you have to fit a mold or change to work at somewhere like the BBC. Just be you, and hopefully it'll get you further than not being you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd say, whilst it's good to kind of have people that you admire, don't try and compare yourself to anyone else. I think that can only kind of lead to you questioning perhaps why you feel things aren't going your way, or I think it's better to just concentrate on yourself. Don't worry about what other people are doing. Have the confidence and self-belief in what you're doing, and just be prepared to put in the hard yards. I think certainly when you're starting out, the reality is you might start in a very junior role for not a lot of money, but you've got to remember that there's so much reward to be had in the industry and the job that we do. It's fun, it's exciting, it's enjoyable, and yeah, starting out, you might not be earning great money, but that doesn't necessarily have to be kind of the route to all happiness. And I think, you know, day to day, if you can find something that you really enjoy, that in itself is really, really rewarding. And I feel that you can certainly find that in this industry. But yeah, you've got to be prepared to work hard. And I think, like anything in any walk of life, working hard is as good as having any talent for something. You know, if you work hard at it, you will improve, and it will get you a really long way. So that would be kind of my sort of last bit of advice. But Craig, Miriam, thanks so much, and hopefully,
Cheers, John.
this will be of great use to anyone watching thinking about getting into the industry. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Good luck, everyone.